Hey everybody, it's Pete Carmasino here at Chaikin Analytics. This is the halftime show here on StockCharts TV. Each and every week we kind of go over the markets. We look at some sectors. We try to look at all the sectors really, kind of just get a gauge of which directions they're heading in. And today we've got some interesting news. We've got some names popping here that haven't been really on the radar for a long time. A couple of retail names, one being Wayfair. We'll look at those. But we got the Dow, the S&P, and the NASDAQ all up today. Pretty big numbers. NASDAQ up almost 1.97. And that's one of the names that we're going to talk about today, too, that had recently turned bullish. It's been sort of back and forth, but we had made a call on our free newsletter. It's called Power Feed. You can go check that out. I'll show you the article today. But it's just simply chaikinpowerfeed.com. You can sign up there, subscribe, get some just interesting articles every day about just kind of the goings on in the markets. And obviously, occasionally we talk about some names that are looking good and kind of the reasons why we are looking at them from a technical standpoint. Then obviously, we always talk about the technicals tell us when, the power gauge is telling us what. So fundamentals and technicals is getting sort of combined together to really formulate, one of our most common thesis here, or themes, which is we want to be in strong stocks and strong groups. And, we utilize the fundamental side using the power gauge rating, which you can buy on StockCharts, pretty inexpensive. It's in the plugin section. Go take a look. That'll give you the ratings on individual names, individual stocks. Okay. And then obviously you use all of the technical resources on the ACP platform to help you out. But at the same time, we also have a platform that we offer that's just simply chaikinanalytics.com. If you go check that out, that gives you the full suite of software. You'll be able to do what I'm doing and kind of locate names that have recently turned bullish, screen for names that are setting up the way we call them on our bullish checklist, and then take a look at some other names. Now, a couple of names we called out a week or so ago have really turned higher. The markets are definitely pushing through resistance. And, we've got the S&P steadily above 4,000 right now, 4,022. But, it's got some ways to go. 4050 is really kind of resistance. 4,100 would be the next stop. And then obviously after that, it looks like all the way up to 4,200 if this trend holds. So, as always, a lot going on here. So let's dive in and take a look at some of the sectors first. And then we'll look at some names that have recently turned bullish. And then we'll look at some further names that have a bullish checklist set up on our system. Okay, everybody. First, I like to start off with this chart. This is the S&P, and I do some bullish percent changes here. And down below, the first one is New York Stock Exchange Composite. The second one is the NASDAQ Composite. Third one is the S&P 500. And all of these are really above what I tried to draw as the recent trend line here. And it's kind of been a little bit choppy, but you can see in periods of rallies, we've seen these particular areas serve as peaks. Okay. When we get above these trend lines, I'm just looking at the bottom one here, the S&P. Look at the last time we were above that trend line, sometime in March of last year. And then we kind of got close to it around here. That was May. And then we certainly got close to it and above it in August. And then once again, we did it again in November. And here we are pushing up against resistance. So is this trend line finally going to get broken? It's hard to say, but we've drawn it and that's where it's at. And so what's the number up here that's kind of migrating to? About that 4,200, 4,250 level. And that's sort of a long-term trend line that's kind of sitting and kind of slicing through some of these rallies. So rally number 5 is underway and is really one of the first to show a higher low. Okay, so the previous ones all put in lower lows. This is the first one that's showing a bit of a higher low. This is a weekly chart. So not a bad indicator here for some bullish sentiment and maybe validating some of the other things that we're hearing on technical charts out there, right? So a lot going on in the technical world. So let's look at some names here, just some quick overview of the sectors. Then we'll get into some individual names as well. So looking at materials, it's been really in a bullish setup since November and kind of got up a little toppy here. This is on the ratio, obviously. And it really seems to top out around this level, which is kind of odd. But you're looking at the actual factor, sort of the sector, and the factor that's kind of coming into play is that sort of that headline or that this resistance line around $86 or so kind of gets shied away from. So all of this is correlating into maybe a little bit of a slowdown in this particular sector, but still a bullish setup on the ratio chart. Now, this one's real interesting. It's really making a push. The communications XLC, it's full of tech names in there. Go take a look if you don't know what's in there. But pushing up against its 200 here on the actual sector ETF itself. And the ratio, really for the first time, also showing some higher lows here before advancing. And so all good stuff. Now, sitting up on the ratio, we're right at resistance there. So that could maybe slow down. I know you want to take a look at a lot of the tech sectors here. So let's take a look at XLK. Very similar setup as XLC, getting above resistance. This one actually did put in a lower low, but is advancing. So that could potentially be an issue. I don't know for sure, but the actual sector itself is above the 200-day. So that's looking pretty good as well. Some of the defensives have kind of just slowed down a little bit and fallen, obviously being used as you would say, maybe proceeds for growth. So people kind of unwinding the defensive ones. There's staples. Here's utilities getting unwound a little bit on the ratio. And here's healthcare also pulling back and getting unwound. Again, all ratio chart reads here kind of just slowing down versus the S&P and sort of sitting sideways on the actual sectors themselves. So let's take a look at some names here right now that have recently turned bullish. And one name I want to talk about is Netflix, because that's on my chart list here. So here's Netflix. Now, it has been back and forth between bullish and neutral, right? And that's basically what's happening underneath our power gauge is all of these factors are being recalibrated, right? So when you get an upgrade or a change in potential earnings, or experts have really now turned the corner, have gone completely bullish on this name. Estimate trends are up, analyst rating trends are up, industry relative strength is up, all pinned to the very bullish area, and short interest is maybe done or just getting better. In other words, that means shorts have been covering, and that could be what we're seeing here. I mean, you start to look at this 334 level, that's filled the gap from back here, okay? And now potentially approaching the next resistance level, which is going to be these recent areas of that maybe double or even triple top at 400, okay? Not too far away, but I told you we have a power feed newsletter here that we talk about some different, ideas that are popping up. And if we go back and kind of look at some of the ones that I called out, this was back in October. You can see we keep an archive of what we talk about. We can go back and look at some of my articles here and just pop through a couple of different things. And back in October, we were talking about maybe outrunning the bear, right, with this indicator. And the name we were talking about was Netflix. And the Netflix stock was trading around $230 a share. That was sort of that week of October 10th. And we go back and we could see what was happening here, right? Right around this level, we had a relative strength change, okay? And so that's the power of the system, getting you involved prior to big moves. And so you're talking about that 213 to 230 level, and then pop on earnings, came back, held support, maybe even filled that gap right there, which it did, and then pushed higher. Now, it's been choppy. It's not been a great ride, but from a Netflix perspective, it's been in good shape. So these are the other names here. Just take note of these real quick. These are names that recently turned bullish, okay? A couple of big names in there. There's Halliburton, obviously Netflix, and one other one. I'm just going to do a real quick look at the chart very quickly. Don't forget, Halliburton's got earnings tomorrow, so just be careful of that if you're doing anything in these names. These aren't recommendations, obviously. And this one's reporting back January 31st next week, but also recently turned bullish and kind of turning the corner. So it's interesting setup there on Spotify. So let's look at some other names as well that have set up from a bullish standpoint. When I talked about our checklist, we have something right here called a little checklist on our system. We try to sort of combine the timing and the strength. Now, not all of these are set up all the way. You can see even Spotify is overbought. So we kind of give that a red kind of a X to say that it's not very strong at the current situation because it's really just pushed up above its bands here and it's been riding the higher bands for a while. So we kind of throw an alert out there by throwing a little red mark on that. But let's just look at a couple of insurance names. One is American Equity. They're a big insurance company. They issue a lot of fixed indexed annuities and fixed annuities, things of that nature. It's been choppy the whole year. Really not a great looking chart from a standpoint of growth. But it certainly played the role of defense and maybe some value, except for this particular pretty bad sell-off here on news, most likely. But a quick recovery could have just been, again, who knows, really, you have to go back and look. But that's one that's just recently turned bullish. But potentially another one that is much maybe more of a common household name would be AFLAC. You've seen the commercials with the duck a million times. Been really choppy back and forth as far as our rating goes because it's been migrating above and below the trend line. But once it got above this trend line, it has stayed. And it's looking pretty interesting here on the pullback. It's oversold. So these are names that are sort of checklist names that are bullish names, very good, obviously, fundamentals, and technicals really strong. Look at the relative strength has been pretty steady the whole way, but now it's in an oversold setup. And so, when you see that, these are sometimes opportunities, but always, please check to see some of the risks and some of the news underlying the stocks as well. Another one is Gilead that's kind of setting up, again, oversold, excellent money flow, incredible relative strength, strong bullish characteristics from the fundamental standpoint, and obviously has popped since earnings and been moving. Now, we just talked about healthcare potentially selling off. So this is a name that kind of gets bundled in there in that group, but it is a large biotech or maybe even a small pharmaceutical, depending on how you want to look at it. How about another name in the oil sector services, Dril-Quip, DRQ? You can take a look there. And that's a name that's actually just recently changing trend on relative strength and obviously on the on the fundamentals. So when you get the combination of both technicals and fundamentals, that's pretty strong. You also have a strong stock and a strong group, and obviously a name that's in the energy industry, very small cap name, really almost a micro cap, to be honest. So just be careful. You don't want to get overwhelmed with some of these names, but use your risk parameters and stops and things like that. Just protect yourself. All right. All right, everybody, that's all we have for today. Thanks for tuning in. Again, this is Pete Carmasino at Chaikin Analytics, your chief market strategist. And this was the halftime show here on StockCharts TV. We'll be back next week with another video. Take care.
Hey, Grayson Rose here with StockCharts. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, consider giving it a like down below, maybe leave us a comment, and if you're new to the channel, you can subscribe at the link up above. We're gonna bring you daily content from an incredible collection of technical analysts and financial experts.